My name is Patty Bernard, and I'm chair of the Nevada Women's History Project. Today is March 25th, 2022, and we are here in Reno, Nevada, interviewing Deborah Armstrong, who is presently a social worker, discharge planner with Renown Hospital.
Thank you so much, Patty, for this. I'm so excited to be here today. I am a Reno native. I was born and raised here, of course. I was born at Washoe Medical Center, which is now called Renown, where my mother works, and she still continues to work there to this day. And I stayed in Reno because this is all that I knew when I was growing up. I always wanted to go away to go to college, but I think I was a little fearful to do that. So I stayed here until probably in my 50s. Late 50s, that is. I'm aging myself. And I left because I just needed a change of environment. And I actually went to Las Vegas to stay with my children. Well, not to stay with them, but to be closer to them, as well as my grandson. And then I came back to Reno.
Where did you go to school? Some of your early schooling activities, what you were interested in, did it relate to what you ultimately did as a life skill?
Okay. Yes, I lived in Sparks most of my life, Sparks, Nevada, and I went to the schools Agnes Risley, Sparks Junior High, and then Sparks High School. I went to the University of Nevada, Reno to get a degree in psychology, and I was always interested in education. I always wanted to learn. I used to love to read stories, just any story that there was. Just loved to read. My mom used to always tell me I always had my head in a book, you know. And I always was the type of person when I was growing up that I asked a lot of questions, and that drove my family crazy.
And were there important people in your life in those formative years that has made a difference in the way that you have led your life?
Yes, my family. I come from a very conservative and pretty strict family. I had a father who was actually my stepfather, but he raised me. And he was, my family came from Mississippi. And so there, my mom used to tell me stories of how when she was working, she would only make $75 a week. And they came out to the West Coast, ended up in Herlong, California, because there was work in California and you made more money in California at that time. They didn't live there too long because they moved to Reno and then moved to Sparks. And this, of course, was before my time. My family was able to raise us and teach us right from wrong. They raised us in the church. They always gave us lots of wisdom. We were very close and connected as a family. So I had several family members here that was really instrumental and really important in teaching me how to be respectful to other people, how to work and have good work ethics, and also how to be able to be kind to other people.
You mentioned that I believe there was a divorce in the family. Did they come as a married couple? I know that he was in the military, and then why did he come to Reno?
They came as single because my father came with his family, his parents and his siblings, and they knew each other from the South. And then my mother came after that with her father and a couple of her siblings. And so then they even though they were raised together in the South, they actually married here in Reno. And they stayed married, I believe, for 52 years until he passed away. He ended up...
Not a divorce then.
Not a divorce, correct. And he ended up passing away because he had dementia, symptoms of dementia.
Interesting. And what town in the South?
It was called Conahatta, Mississippi, which is where my mother's from. And he was from Decatur, Mississippi, which is kind of like neighbors. Mm-hmm. Yes. So I did have several mentors. I started off as a social worker, and so I remember having a social worker. I used to stress a lot about everything because everything had to be just done perfectly. And she used to always tell me, stop stressing. Things always have a way of working themselves out. And those are words that I still live by to this day. And then after I decided I wanted to go and help battered women. So I used to work for an agency that was back then called Committee to Aid Abused Women. And that's where I found my passion. That's where I found my love of working with women and children that have been in abusive relationships. What we provided for them, besides safe haven was a shelter. We helped them with getting a protection order. We helped them with going to groups. We helped them with advocacy. We helped them with a lot of different things, clothes, food baskets, whatever they may have needed at the time. And so I think what caused me to love that so much is because hearing their stories. You know, and from hearing their stories, you learned how they are such strong women and such strong survivors. Because many times the society looks at battered women as being weak and pitiful and, you know, lazy or whatever the negative descriptions they use. But in reality, these women, in my opinion, of course, is very strong and very wise, and they have a life and they have stories. And so I loved listening to their stories. After I left that particular agency, it was always on my heart. So the staff there, backtrack, at Committee to Aid Abused Women, and working with them, we were very close-knit, kind of like family, for lack of better words. I always felt that there was a need for other types of women. And when I mean other types of women, it used to be that women that had teenage boys could not go into a shelter program. I, at the time, had teenage boys, and I know if I ever needed to have a shelter, I have to go to a shelter, I would not want to leave my boys behind. And also, I also noticed that I read an article one time, and I can't remember who the article was by, but it was by a woman that pretty much stated that women of color, particularly African American women, prefers to go to a program that looks with somebody that looks like them. And I knew from growing up in this area and having family members that have been through domestic violence that there's a lot of African Americans that sit silent and they don't go to shelter programs and they stay and endure the abuse. And so I wanted to be able to reach out to those women as well. So I started a program called Safe Embrace. Initially, when I first opened the doors, I actually started by doing a clothes closet, a food closet, things like that. I didn't have a shelter at that time. And I used to call it Victorious in a Sight. And that was based on my faith beliefs. And then when we opened up the shelter, or when I opened up the shelter, I then changed it to becoming Safe Embrace, because more people could tolerate that name better than the name that, you know, I was utilizing. And so I started by helping women of all nationalities, but the focus, of course, was women that had teenage sons or teenage children, period, as well as women of color, because I really believe in diversity, and I really believe that we all need to learn from each other and to be able to work together as one. I also modeled what I call the respect system, because that was really important to me. And one of the ways that I applied that is that when we had little girls and women in the shelter, we call them by the miss and their first name. And we let them know that when we do that, that's our way of saying that we're respecting you. If we had little boys or teenage boys in the shelter, we called them Mr. and by their first name. We believed in being a family because we oftentimes had family meetings. If there was a problem in the shelter, instead of saying, oh, you did something wrong, let's have a family meeting, because whatever happened influenced everybody in that shelter, including staff. So we talked about it. You know, how can we handle this situation so that it doesn't happen again, or whatever the case may be.
There are many folks that do not want a shelter or a residence in their neighborhood. Mm-hmm. How did you address that as a potential problem?
Yes, it was that the home that we were able to get was a home that was already addressed to handle nonprofit people that are maybe not as accepted. And so the families that lived in that particular area already knew that. Of course, when domestic violence came in, they were a little concerned about it. And so I tried to make sure the shelter didn't have a lot of activity on the outside going on so that they would be afraid, or whatever the case may be. We also had a verbal relationship with the police officers, that they would drive by on a regular basis just to make sure there was nothing, you know, chaotic going on the outside. We also had the guideline of that the women could not hang out in the front of the shelter, and the reason why was, of course, for their safety, just in case somebody drove by. And so all of our activities and everything that we did was actually in the backyard. So I think that they came to actually respect us for the simple fact that I recall one Christmas, we had Christmas gifts on our front porch from some of the neighbors.
How fantastic.
Yeah, that was exciting to see that.
And what kind of services did you provide for them as they stayed in this shelter?
Because I'm a social worker, one of the first things I did was to find what we call a LCSW, which stands for Licensed Clinical Social Worker, to actually come into the home and provide therapy at no cost to the women and the children that needed it. It was not something mandatory, it was just if they needed it. And the women there utilized it quite often. Another service that we provide for them is we had educational classes. And so we would teach them about domestic violence, because a lot of times people think that domestic violence is just beatings and yelling and slapping and things like that. But there's the mental side of it, there's the emotional side of it. So we would educate them on that. We had a little boy in our shelter, and I believe he was like 4 or 5 years old. And he came to me one day, he goes, "Miss Deborah," he goes, "moms have meetings." He goes, "We want a kids meeting." And I said to him, I said, "So-and-so," I said, "What do you want to call it?" He goes, "Let's call it Kids Club." So that's how we started having what we call the Kids Club. And the Kids Club was where the kids went together, and we taught them about how to keep themselves safe. We also taught them about, no hitting, safety, dangerous safety and things like that. So it was more educational based for them as well. And then of course we provided meals for them. Of course we provided assistance if they needed to go to get a protection order. If we needed to, we served as a legal advocate where we would go to court with them, more for moral support, because of course we weren't attorneys. And then we also provided what we call family outings. So once a month as a family, including staff, we would all get together and go somewhere. It could have been at a park, it could have been an amusement park, or wherever, we do that once a month.
How did you handle a potential spouse that might be abusive and felt that he could come to this if he knew? And I understand you were a shelter that most people didn't know, but then you never can tell.
Right.
How did you handle that type of an interaction should they come?
Okay, so we started at the beginning. When we actually did our intake, we explained to the people that were coming to us that this was a safe house and that it had to be kept confidential, and that they couldn't invite their batterers or family or whomever there. And so they had to sign something saying that they were going to abide for those guidelines. Of course, we did have problems on that occasionally, but we also taught the women not to open the door, And then at early years, we did not have security there at the house, but then years later, we did have security so that we could see if anybody was coming into the house that shouldn't be in the house, okay? And so the staff was really good because we had the backyard fence, so people couldn't necessarily see in the back what was going on. And so if someone was at the door, because we had our office right on site at the time, they would come and tell us a man's outside or so-and-so's husband or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. What did you do for financing?
Okay. Because we were a nonprofit, we applied for grants. We were able to get the Marriage License Fund money. We were also able to get some federal money that the state divided up among different organizations within the state of Nevada. We also were able to get private foundation grants, and then we also sought donations from private citizens. The focus of Safe Embrace was to reach out to the underserved populations. So one of the ways that we did this is that we were the only domestic violence agency in the state of Nevada that actually went to the jail and provide educational courses for the women there about domestic violence and keeping themselves safe. We call those classes self-care classes or self-esteem classes. So that's one of the ways that we were different in the community as well.
In the course of your work, outside of your family, were there any role models that you, or mentors that you especially remember?
Yes, I had many role models that no one can do this by themselves, okay? And the role models to me, I'm going to start off with the women that we helped, because I learned so much from those women, and I loved watching their growth. I loved watching how they cared for each other, and they became friends, of course, they're at the shelter, and I heard that some of them, after they left the shelter, they became friends and continued to see each other. So they were probably my biggest mentors. The other mentors that has helped me along the way were the people that worked works for me, as well as the volunteers and the people that actually believed in what we were trying to do. I had people that helped me with writing grants. I had people that helped with giving us diapers and donations that maybe would need, clothing, whatever it was, that the family need. We had, like, for example, the City of Reno's Victim Advocates Office come in and help us with the kids as far as having the first Christmas that we had there at the shelter. And that was led by Lori Frelick and her team. And they came in and brought tons of gifts for those kids and just really was there and gave them a Christmas party. And for some of those kids, that was their first Christmas party. Another person that really helped me a lot, that was one of my mentors because of my faith beliefs, was my pastor. My pastor always said that where there's a need, there's a ministry. And I had gone to them and told them what I wanted to do. So they opened up their doors, allowed me to do support groups for women that were victims of domestic violence. I was focusing at that time on the Christian woman, because a lot of times there's a myth that this doesn't happen to Christian women and that Christian women should stay in abusive relationships. And my role was to educate not only the women but even their leaders that, women have to be safe, that telling a woman to stay is not necessarily a healthy thing for her to do. Also, I started with the shelter. My program started in 1996. Okay, and then that was where I was doing clothes closet. I was doing food drives and just counseling, things like that. I became a nonprofit in 1999. I opened the shelter in 2001, and the shelter is still thriving today. Still in the same location, and I'm told, received a phone call from somebody recently that told me that they're still doing great things.
And obviously you left. Why did you leave?
I left because there needed to be a change. That we're run by board of directors, and sometimes they want to go in a direction that you don't necessarily want to go in. So that's why I left.
And from there you went where?
I went to Las Vegas. I became a social worker. I always had my license as a social worker, but I became a social worker for the state, and then worked for the skilled nursing facility, which was new for me, working with the elderly populations, and just loved it. Just really loved it. Stayed there for a while, came back to Reno because it's my hometown, went back to Las Vegas because I was missing my grandson, and then came back to Reno. And so here I am again today.
And how long have you been back in Reno?
I've been back for about 1.5 years now. And so I was fortunate to get a job at Renown, which I do love a lot. And at the same time, I was going to school to get a master's in social work. So in December, I actually graduated with my master's in social work.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And what kinds of duties do you do as a discharge person?
Okay.
For I'm assuming the patients as
Right.
they leave.
Right. So my role as a discharge planner is to help. The doctors will order orders that the patient may need to go home with, or the doctor may order orders of the patient needs to go to what we call the skilled nursing facility for therapy. And then there's times that they have other needs. They might need a wound vac or whatever the case may be. So my role is whatever the doctor is ordering to make sure those things happen so that the patient can have a safe discharge. If it's going to a skilled nursing facility or if it's going home, they might need home health services. I set up transportation to get them from point A to point B. So it's a lot of busy work that we're doing. And we go to rounds, so we talk about the patients and what their needs are and things like that.
Do you ever feel that, and I'm thinking more of an older individual that is coming from their home situation and cannot go back to their home. How do you handle such a situation, which is very emotional, I would think, for that individual?
Right, you're right. It is very emotional for them. And so one of the things that we do is I spend a lot of time talking to the patient and informing him or her of why this has to occur. Sometimes they're accepting and sometimes they're not. If there's family, then we definitely will talk to the family and ask the family to help because they're their biggest advocates, for the patient. And so we spend a lot of time just kind of going back and forth with each other, talking, and I tell them about the resources. I encourage them to go out there and Google and do a search for themselves because this is new to a lot of people. And a lot of people have a lot of misunderstanding of what certain services can and cannot provide for them.
What do you think your most significant contribution has been in your many activities?
To me, my most significant passion has been Safe Embrace. I feel in my heart that I left a legacy for thousands of women and children that not only need a safe house, but need someone to have a listening ear and accept them and respect them for who they are. I will never forget that, because that's exactly what I wanted to do, was to help.
Has this safe house idea been replicated in Reno in other areas, in other words, in Sparks, or is this pretty much the resident safe house in Reno, Sparks?
Yeah, so the answer to that question, it is not what I would call the resident safe house in Sparks or Reno, because there was another one prior to us. I wasn't considering myself duplicating anything. I was saying that there was a need for other types of people that weren't getting services. And so there's really, to be honest with you, a need for more than just the two in the Reno Sparks area. There's domestic violence services houses, throughout the state of Nevada. But even with that, there still is not enough, because there's and I might be misquoting the statistic right now, but I believe it's every 12 seconds a woman is being abused by someone she knows. Intimate relationship.
What are some of the ways that you reach out to individuals that don't feel that is the answer for them in their particular situation, but it really is?
Right. So the way I approach that is that I will give them the information if it's safe for me to give them paper information for them to read, or suggest that they go and Google, just because there's a lot of information on the web about domestic violence, what it is, safe houses, things like that. And then my role, though, particularly, is to listen, and just let them know if you're not ready yet, this is a service that you can utilize at a later date. My role is not to force them to do something that they're not ready. And the reason why I'm like that is because it's been proven that women that leave abusive relationships are at a higher risk of being murdered than staying in that abusive relationship. So I look at the women as being the expert. They know when it's time to leave and what services that they really need. Washoe County Court did work with us. We worked very closely with the City of Reno, who had a victim advocate, as well as the City of Sparks, who had an advocate, as well as the Washoe County Victim Advocate's Office.
Everyone experiences successes and failures. Can you discuss some of those that have affected your life in some way, both successes and failures?
I've had lots. Lots of failures. Some of the failures that I had, of course, were personal failures in relationships. And then other failures that I had, I don't necessarily, I don't want to call it failures. I really want to call it life lessons. I've learned so much from everything that I've done that maybe wasn't the right thing to do, okay? I'm pretty much a blunt person and very direct, as you heard the other day that I am. And so I had to learn how to tone it down a little bit because it didn't work very well with everybody, as you can imagine. So that was something that was a little challenging for me. Another thing is I am a type of person where I have very high expectations of people. I see the best in everybody. And so I had to learn that maybe by me talking so much and telling them that how I see them as being better than what they see themselves, that may not have been comfortable and they weren't ready to receive it. So I had to learn to tone it down, listen more than what I'm talking, and to be able to just do things differently. As far as running a company, that basically was some of the challenges that I learned, is I learned that I had to slow down and not want to grow as quickly. I think because, the other program was a lot larger than us. They had a whole lot more money than we did, and I wanted to be like them, And I was often told by people, just be where you're at, be comfortable where you're at, and the rest will come. Of course, I wanted it like right now. And I think in doing that probably took my judgment on picking people that were on my team that really shouldn't have been on my team. You know, and that was both in the employment process as well as volunteers.
So that was a skill that you learned through trial and error.
Exactly. It was a skill that I learned. Yes.
Well, you've had an interesting life. How would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered as a kind person. I would like to be remembered as someone that respects. I would like to be remembered as a proactive person that is very passionate about women and women's issues.
Are there some things that you know now that you wish you had known years ago?
Yes. I think one of the things is when I went into this initially, even though I had helpers, I went into it believing that I could do it all by myself. I wish I would have known that I can't do by myself. I wish I would have probably trusted people a lot more and have them help me carry some of the load. Because when I first started, I did everything, literally everything. And that was like, it burns you out a little bit, but I just kept on doing it because it had to be right.
And who do you see that's going to carry on this legacy that you started?
Whoever is running the shelter now, hopefully that they will continue. When I first started it, I wanted my daughter to continue and leave the legacy, but we're both no longer there. But I do see my daughter as carrying it on indirectly because she is an advocate for battered women, and she's also the type of woman, she has a company where she makes soaps and things like that. And so she's always talking about her agency as self-care. Women being able to take care of themselves, which is something that was really important to me as well. So I see her leading it on, but just a little differently than what I would have, but still, she's still helping women.
So just a legacy through your daughter also.
Exactly, yes.
You've had obviously some wonderful successes.
Mm-hmm.
Are there still goals in your life, bucket list types of things that you still would like to accomplish?
Yes, I have a probably lengthy bucket list, but just to name a few. One of the things that I'm pursuing right now, in addition to what I'm already doing, is I'm really striving to become what I call an empowerment coach. I really want to take those same type of women that have struggles with their identity and to be able to help them to see the value in them. The reason why that is so important to me, because I believe that if you see the value in yourself, then that is going to help you to fulfill the dreams that you may have as an individual. Another thing that I would love to do, I love to travel. So I would love to be able to go to other countries where maybe domestic violence is something that is not necessarily available to them, and be able to work there to learn more of how they handle in their communities domestic violence, as well as to be able to help with the information that I have and the knowledge that I have. I wrote this book, When the Kisses Stop, A Tale of Lessons Learned. It's a workbook, and the reason why I wrote it is because I recall having a conversation with a staff member, a colleague of mine, I should say, and we were talking about women, and we were talking about women that basically talked about that how they were involved in a relationship, and in this particular case, this person befriended a male and pretty much signed the deed to her house and everything to him. And before, he was such a romantic person, he was kissing on her and telling her how much he loved her, but when she did that, he actually stopped. And that just like clicked like a light bulb in me. And so I just said, I want to share stories of women and their experiences and what the life lessons that they learned when their kisses stopped. So the reason why I say it's a workbook, because I like for women to get this book and read, and it could be available to men too, anybody that wants to read it, but more so women to get together in groups and talk about the different life lessons that they learned from their relationships. The title of the book is called When the Kisses Stop, A Tale of Lessons Learned. And the reason why I wrote this book is because I wanted women to talk about any challenges they may have had in their relationships, and how usually when you're in an intimate relationship, kissing is a part of it. And so what lessons did they learn when that relationship was no longer valid, that relation ended? you know, because we learn a lot from the other person. And the reason why kisses is important to me is because a kiss is a seal of appreciation, of value, of love, of intimacy, and the list can go on and on and on. But when those kisses actually stop, the woman is usually left feeling abandoned, rejected, angry, frustrated, confused, and the list could go on there as well. But very seldom do we sit down as women and talk about what are the lessons that we learned. And so that's why this workbook was written. I captured at least 5 stories. It's 5 short stories of different women and in different scenarios.
And are you planning on using this then in your work as you go forward?
Yes, I am. Yes, I want to be able to utilize this as part of my coaching. And I also want to be able to utilize this for people. I'm considering doing what I would call a book club and having the women to purchase this book. It's available at Amazon.com in a Kindle and a book format. And that we could have book clubs talking about this. And I believe that's going to open the door for women to be able to talk about their experiences in addition with the characters that's written in the book.
So a much larger form of group therapy.
I'm not going to use the word therapy because I'm not qualified to say that. I'm not licensed to say I'm providing therapy, but I'm providing help.
Life experience.
Life experience help, yes.
Okay. And can you share some of your other pictures that you brought with us, or
Sure.
memorabilia?
Sure.
You talked about your family.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So these are just a couple pictures of my family, and this is my cherished family. It's my mother, who is still living today, and this is her great-grandson, which is my first grandchild, period. And so this was taken here in Reno, Nevada. My grandson lives in Las Vegas. He was born here.
And how old is your mother?
My mother is 83. She still works, and she works at Renown, and she's their longest employee. She's been there 65 years.
And I don't believe that you gave us the name of your parents. Can you give us
I sure
their name?
didn't. I forgot. Forgive me. My father's name was Deborah Bufkin Jr., and my mother's name is Margene Bufkin.
I have heard of Margene.
Okay. Well, this is Margene. And then my second gift to me is my children. And so I have here my oldest son. His name is Robert. And I have my middle child, which his name is Sean. And Sean lives in New York. My son Robert lives in Las Vegas. And this is Robert's wife, Olivia. She also lives in Las Vegas, so she's the mom to my grandson. And this is my baby child, my daughter. Her name is Sherelle, and she lives in Las Vegas as well. And then, of course, there's me. And so this picture was actually taken in Las Vegas.
I'm sure that you have some thoughts on younger women who have gifts and talents in various areas. What kind of advice would you give to a young woman? It could also be a young man, but
right.
Obviously, as Nevada Women's History Project.
Right. I think the gift that I would give to young women is to believe in themselves. I would also like to advise them that if they have a dream, go forward and do it, you know. And I would like to suggest for them is just to just enjoy their life and just get their education if they feel like they need it, because unfortunately in many cases we do need that today. And even if it is a trade school, you always want to educate yourself on perfecting your craft, making your craft stronger. And so whatever it is that they desire to do, I like to suggest for them to go forth and do it and make a difference in the community, because that's why we're here.
And finally, I asked quite a few questions. Is there something that I have not asked that you would like to add?
I can't think of anything. I think you did a great job in asking the questions that you did ask, so I'm good.
I think you've had an interesting life, and
Yes.
I'm not sure what your age is, but I know you have a lot more to give, and
Yes.
and I'm very hopeful that you continue to make the impacts in other people as you have now.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
interviewing with us.
And thank you.